and welcome to this video where we will go through line by line the vocabulary and the meaning of the poem "Twas the Night Before Christmas," the most famous Christmas poem that there is, and it's pretty up there as a famous poem overall. If you haven't seen the video where I just do a read through of the poem just so that you can enjoy it as a piece of literature, I would suggest you start with that one. You should be able to find it in the playlist on my channel. In this video, I'm going to give you a really good chance to have a think yourself and do some writing practice so that you're really getting some good practice on your own if you're English. If you want to play along with that, great. If you want to just skip past that writing practice, that's an option too. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. If you haven't met before, my name is Sarah Coelho, and here on this channel, I help intermediate to advanced learners of English gain real clarity and confidence in using their English. Let's jump into it. Okay, so we'll start by looking at lines 1 to 6, and here are those lines. So I'll read it through first, and then we'll jump into the meaning. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads." Okay, remember I said there would be time for some writing practice? Well, here it is. Pause the video, grab a pen and a piece of paper, and just take a moment and write down, what do you think those lines are about? You know, if someone asked you, what does that mean? What would you write down? What's happening in those 6 lines? Okay, well, let's look at it line by line. So "twas" is archaic, as in that means it's no longer used, and it's just a contraction meaning it was the night before Christmas. And of course, the night before Christmas is Christmas Eve. So it was Christmas Eve. It was the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring. So to stir has several different meanings, which you can see there on the screen. We're looking at meaning number 2, where it means to move slightly. For example, I accidentally stirred the papers off the desk. So nobody was awake and moving. So stirring can also mean to actually wake up. You know, my house begins stirring around 6 a.m. when I make coffee. But in this instance, it means that not a creature was stirring, moving around. So basically it's saying everyone was asleep in their beds. Now let's just notice that we wouldn't actually use the "not a creature" part. We would say no one was stirring. Not a creature it's part of the poem, but it's not what we would use in everyday life. The stockings were hung. Okay, at the top you can see the difference between stockings on the left and tights on the right. That's our everyday kind of usage. But in this instance, the stockings, it's referring to a large sock, a stocking that children leave out when they go to bed the night before Christmas so that it can be filled with small presents. So it's a Christmas tradition to leave them out. And as you can see in the picture, the actual Christmas stockings are quite large and quite, beautifully decorated and Christmas things. And then the stockings were hung by the chimney with care. So this is where they would be hung. I'm sure you probably know what a chimney is. The actual chimney part is the kind of the big hole where the fire, the smoke from the fire escapes. And then there's a whole bunch of other names for the parts of a chimney, which you're probably not interested in, but I've put them here. Really, we actually hang the stockings on the mantle, or sometimes we call this the mantelpiece. And people often have pictures of family and things on the mantelpiece. Anyway, so in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. So St. Nicholas was a Christian bishop, that means a senior member of the church, of Greek descent, who in the 4th century helped the poor and needy in what is current-day Turkey. He was famous for working miracles and giving gifts. After his death, the legend of his generous gift-giving grew and eventually became the basis for our modern-day Santa Claus myth. I could actually do several videos on like the history of Santa Claus. There's been many different myths and stories and traditions in many different places. But just looking specifically for now, in British English, formally we would usually say Father Christmas. So you see Father Christmas mentioned on television and radio and often in adverts. But more and more and more people use Santa, and that's also becoming quite common informally. In US English, people do use Santa Claus or Santa. So in this poem, they refer to him as Saint Nicholas or Saint Nick, and that's quite an old-fashioned way of referring to Santa. So I'll just call him Santa for ease throughout the rest of our video as we go through this. So this American poem we are studying created the modern-day American version of the Santa Claus myth. This poem stole the Dutch Sinterklaas myth and made it more relatable to American settlers with a British background. So there's quite a history to this poem, and in this video I'm not going into the history of it. It's a whole other video. In this video we're just looking at the vocabulary and just looking at the meaning, and I do hope to create another video where we look at the history of the author and the time in which he was writing. Anyway, the last line here, it says, "It is thought Santa's coat is red because of a Coca-Cola advert." And as I mentioned, there's of course many different versions of the Santa Claus myth in many different countries, and these are just some of the different names that he has around the world. Okay, going back to our poem. The children were nestled all snug in their beds. To nestle means to rest yourself in a warm, comfortable, and protected position. And snug just means comfortable, warm, cozy. We have an idiom in English, we say snug as a bug in a rug. Well, we say that to children anyway, maybe not to adults. And then next line, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. This was the closest I could get to a picture of a sugar plum, which is an old-fashioned kind of sweet. And while visions, it's just saying that the children were dreaming of sweets. Okay, so that was our run through of lines 1 to 6. Just pause for a moment, have a look at what you thought that it meant before we went through it. Check what you wrote. Is there anything you want to add to it? Just take a minute to do that. Okay, so lines 1 to 6. Basically, the meaning is everyone in the house is asleep. Before they went to sleep, they hung up stockings so that St. Nicholas could fill them with small gifts. The children are comfortable in bed and having beautiful dreams about sweets. And these world-famous lines describe the quiet magic of Christmas Eve. Okay, moving on to lines 7 to 12. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. Okay, pause the video, take a moment, write down what you think it means. And also, think about question number 1, who is the speaker in these lines? And 2, does the reader feel afraid for them? Why or why not? Okay, so and Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap. Let's not spend too much time on this because these are very old-fashioned words for old-fashioned pieces of clothing, so it's not really useful. So you can see a picture of a kerchief, kind of like piece of cloth that women would wear over their head at night, and often men would wear some sort of sleeping cap, keep their head warm. We don't do that nowadays, but we do sometimes in the UK use handkerchiefs, or we call them hankies, like a piece of cloth that we actually blow our nose into. That's quite disgusting, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, next line. Had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. Let's just acknowledge we would never in day-to-day life say just settled our brains. It's kind of creepy. We would say we had just settled down for a sleep. And in this sentence, they're using nap when really they mean sleep. And what they're saying is that the mother and father of the family had just gone to bed. So we use settle down to mean go to sleep, but we certainly would never use settled our brains. Okay, when out on the lawn, there arose such a clatter. So a lawn is the area usually outside the front or the back of a house that has really short grass. It's part of the garden connected to the house. So he's opened the window and he's looked out, and he knows that there's something happening in his garden. Arose is very formal. It means to arise, means to begin to exist or to develop. So there is beginning. And then a clatter is the continuous sound of hard objects falling or hitting each other. So there would be a clatter if you dropped a whole bunch of plates, for example. I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. To spring means to move or jump suddenly or rapidly upwards or forwards. Away to the window I flew like a flash. So like a flash is an idiom, and it just means very quickly. Tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. Tore open is a phrasal verb, and it means to open something quickly or forcefully, like you might tear open an envelope, for example. And shutters, you can see those in the picture at the top right. It's a pair of hinged panels fixed inside or outside a window that can be closed for security or privacy or to keep out the light. So it's quite an American custom to have shutters. We don't have them in the UK. I think they're quite beautiful. I really like them. In some places, they have shutters and then a mosquito screen. Yeah, they're beautiful. We don't have them. We do have a lot of sash windows. So a sash window is when there's like two different panels of glass and you move the panel closest to you up, and that opens the window. So he threw up the sash so that he could stick his head outside to see what was happening. Okay, who is the speaker? Does the reader feel afraid for them? Why or why not? Are you clear on that? Take a moment to check what you wrote. What did you think these lines were about? Do you want to add to it? Okay, so the father of the house is the speaker in these lines. So he is asleep in bed and he hears a loud noise outside the house and immediately goes to the window to see what it is. And we're not afraid for him. It's not like a scary story because the strong rhyme scheme, so for example, cap, nap, clatter, matter, flash, sash, it creates a playful feeling. So the reader knows that this is not a scary story where the family are in danger. Because if you really think about it, Santa Claus is someone who does a lot of breaking and entering. Like he literally breaks into people's houses. So a story where someone is woken up because they hear a noise outside and then they think someone's breaking in, like that could be a really scary story. But in this instance, because of that rhyme scheme, the cap, nap, clatter, matter, there's just really playful feel. We of course know that this is not scary, it's playful. Okay, lines 13 to 18. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be Saint Nick. Okay, so take a moment, write down what you think those lines are about. What does it mean? So the moon on the breast of the new fallen snow, we certainly wouldn't use, perhaps this is an old-fashioned way of saying it, but the breast of the snow in this instance is talking about like the kind of the layers of new snow that's fallen. So the moon is shining down on the new layers of snow, but we certainly wouldn't put it that way in modern English. But gave a lustre of midday to objects below. So luster means the brightness that a shiny surface has. So what it's saying is the moon is shining on the new snow that's been falling, and that's making all the things there kind of shiny, almost as if it's like daylight. The moon is so strong that it seems like it's daylight. He can see clearly because the moonlight is so strong. When what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. Okay, so you can see the reindeer there, you can see the sleigh. Normally a sleigh would be something that would be pulled through snow, but of course Santa Claus has one that flies. With a little old driver so lively and quick. Lively means full of life and energy, active and outgoing. So this is the start of describing Santa as someone who's old but still moving quickly because he's got a lot to do. I knew in a moment he must be Saint Nick. Okay, take a moment, check what you wrote. Is there anything you want to add to it before we go through the meaning? So when looking out the window, the father notices the light of the moon on the new snow on the ground. The moonlight is so strong, it makes objects seem as if they are in midday light. He is then really surprised to see a sleigh with reindeer and an old but lively driver. He knows this must be Santa, or Saint Nick, Saint Nicholas. Okay, so that's the meaning of those lines. Let's look at lines 14 to 19. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now, Dasher, now, Dancer, Prancer and Vixen, on, Comet, Cupid, on, Donna and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. Take a moment, write down, what do you think is happening in those lines? More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came. Rapid means happening in a short time or at a great rate, basically means fast. Courser is a strong and fast type of horse. So this is actually a metaphor. I'm not going to go on about this too much, but just very quickly, a metaphor compares two things that are not usually compared but that have something in common. And a metaphor says one thing is the other in order to help the reader or listener understand better and create an image in their mind. So for example, you are a star. So I'm comparing you to a star. So the two things are you and number one and star number two. And in doing that, I imply that you are really shining brightly. So you're doing well in something, or you've got a big talent that's shining. So there's this idea that you've been successful or you're shining brightly and doing something well. So similar to a metaphor, a simile is almost the same, but it uses like or as. So here's some examples of a simile, and it's useful to look at the structure. So the first one, you are like a star. The same thing, you're comparing this person to a star and saying that they're doing well in some way. Or you can also say you are star-like, which is another structure which is quite sophisticated. So you can use like, or you could also use as. So you are as bright as a star. So going back to the example in the poem, more rapid than eagles, his coursers they came. So the reindeer are flying faster than eagles can fly, and the metaphor is that it's comparing the reindeer to strong horses and saying that they're strong, so strong that they actually are those horses. So basically just saying the reindeer are flying really fast and really strong. And he whistled and shouted and called them by name. So you can see the picture of someone whistling. Unfortunately, you can't hear the example, but I'm sure you know what whistling is. Basically, Santa is getting the attention of the reindeer and saying, come on, we've got to get moving. Whistling and shouting and calling their names. So you can see in the punctuation that there's a sense of urgency, like they've got to move fast. I mean, they've got a lot of presents to deliver, right? The exclamation marks after the names, it creates a sense of urgency and this idea of like him shouting. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. A porch is a covered shelter with a roof and open sides that is in front of the building. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. To dash away means to run away or to leave in a hurry. And similarly, we also say to dash as well. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't stay. I've got to dash. I've got to leave. So it's quite a useful phrasal verb for sure. Okay, check what you wrote. Is there anything you want to add to it? So the reindeer are flying faster than eagles and are as strong as horses. Santa whistles and calls out to each reindeer, loudly encouraging. He orders them where to go as he makes his deliveries. He is clear they have all got to keep going and have to be quick. Lines 20 to 25. As leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. Take a moment. What do you think it means? As leaves before that wild hurricane fly. Okay, so a hurricane is a violent storm with very strong winds, as you can see in the picture. And in this sentence, it says, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So an obstacle is something that is in your way or stopping you from making progress, and to mount means to climb up, to go over. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew. Okay, let's put all of this together. I'm not going to spend too much time looking at it because it's quite an old-fashioned way of saying this. But if you look at the top here, as leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew. Basically, if I was to put that in more modern English, I would say the reindeer are moving as fast as a hurricane. They're flying so fast that they are like a hurricane and they're just flying over obstacles with ease. With the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof. In a twinkling is archaic, as in no longer used, and it used to mean a very short time. We do have a modern idiom that's quite formal that we still use in British English, which is in the twinkling of an eye, which means a very short time. So, for example, in the twinkling of an eye, my dog ran off before I could stop him, right? It's a little bit still old-fashioned, but it is still used. The prancing and pawing of each little hoof. So prancing means to move with high steps, and pawing is when an animal, so it's usually for animals, to feel or scrape with a paw or hoof. So an animal is kind of touching you with their paw or touching something with their paw or hoof. And then the hoof is the hard part of the foot of some animals, the reindeer. So prancing and pawing, it's alliterative. It's got that repetition of the consonant sound, the p, and it's a sense of, you can really feel, the reindeer are excited and they're kind of dancing around on the roof. Check what you wrote. Is there anything you would add to it? So the reindeer move quickly from the ground to the roof. They move as fast as a hurricane, easily passing over any obstacles. The speaker sees Santa's sleigh is full of toys as it flies past, and he hears the reindeer up on the roof of his house. Lines 26 to 31. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. Write it down. What do you think it means? As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. So a bound is a high or long jump. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. Tarnished. To tarnish means to destroy the shine of something. So his clothes are ruined in some way. So ashes, the grey or black powder that is left after something is burned. You can see that in the top right hand corner. And then soot is the black powder that is produced when something is burned. So basically his clothes they're covered in ashes and soot because he's come down a chimney. That's what happens if you come down a chimney, I would imagine. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. So a peddler is an old-fashioned and now offensive, it's derogatory, offensive. It's a word that means a person who travels from place to place trying to sell small things. So we wouldn't use that word nowadays. We would use it not to describe a person, but that word to peddle is used if you are implying that someone is selling something that is illegal. Oh, that person was peddling drugs. So if you're selling something illegal, we'd use it in that context. So this is the first instance where I was quite uncomfortable with this poem. Because peddler is has such negative connotation to it. And I did do a little bit of digging around, looking at the history of this poem. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the author was being quite elitist, quite snobby, was looking down on a certain class of people. And there's a lot of there's many layers to this poem. I'll just leave it at that for now. And I'll just say peddler is an offensive word. Okay, so check what you wrote. What do you think this is about? The speaker pulls his head in from the window and sees Santa coming down the chimney. Santa's clothes, his clothes are made out of fur and are dirty from the chimney. The speaker thinks he looks like someone trying to sell toys when actually he is about to give toys as gifts. Lines 32 to 39. His eyes, how they twinkled, dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry, his droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. Take a moment, write down what you think it means. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. Okay, so to twinkle, the verb means to shine with a light that changes constantly from strong to weak. The light is coming on and off. So yeah, we talk about eyes twinkling when someone is excited. A dimple you can see in the picture, bottom left-hand corner, and then merry just means happy. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. Got some good similes going on there. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow. Droll means curious or unusual in a way that provokes dry amusement. So the way it's funny is not what you would expect. And a bow is a weapon used for shooting arrows. It's kind of just saying that his mouth was making a smile. And the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. To encircle means to surround something completely in a circle, and a wreath is an arrangement of flowers and leaves in a circle that you can see in the picture. He had a broad little face and a little round belly, shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. Okay, check what you wrote. Is there anything you want to add to it? The speaker describes Santa and how he seems magical and happy, and the speaker has interacted enough with Santa to know what he looks like when he laughs. Lines 40 to 47. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney, he rose. Okay, take a moment, write down your thoughts. What does it mean? He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf. Chubby and plump are both synonyms that mean slightly fat, and elf is a supernatural creature of folk tales, typically represented as a small, delicate figure in human form. And elves are kind of grumpy usually. So there's this juxtaposition or contrast of, really human and then also quite mythical, magical, which is a strange, funny contrast. And I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. So he laughs because of that contrast. And in spite of means in defiance of or regardless of. So in spite of myself means I didn't want to, but couldn't help it. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head. Wink means to close one eye and then open it again quickly. A wink is typically used to indicate that something is a joke or a secret or as a silly sign of affection. So again, this could be a scary situation if someone broke into your house, but the father understands that it's not, and Santa's kind of giving him a wink, a little bit, kind of showing affection, and a little bit it's a kind of conspiratorial gesture, saying, hey, you can see me, now you're in on the secret kind of thing, and you shouldn't be afraid. And then the next line, soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. And to dread means to be afraid of something, to fear something bad will happen. So yeah, that wink was to say, hey, there's, nothing to fear. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work. To go straight to something means to go directly to something. And filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose. So this is another gesture, and this is a gesture which indicates a bond and that something should be kept secret. So when someone makes this gesture, it's kind of saying, I know that you know, we both know, we're both in on this. So Santa's really saying, I know you saw me, but don't tell anyone, kind of it's our little secret. And giving a nod up the chimney, he rose. So to nod means to lower and raise one's head slightly and briefly, especially in greeting or saying goodbye, or of course to show agreement. And it's also used to give someone a signal. So we talk about waiting for the nod, which means waiting for approval. So just another gesture to show kind of that they are, that they've had this moment of interaction. Okay, check what you wrote. Is there anything you want to add to it? The speaker describes Santa as both real and magical. This mixture makes the speaker laugh, even though he doesn't want to be rude. Santa leaves his gifts and acknowledges the father has seen him and makes a gesture to suggest it should stay a secret. Or actually, really, it's several gestures. And not just that it should be a secret, but kind of gestures of connection. These last lines, I'm just going to read them through. There's only a couple of things to go through. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. On the left, you can see a thistle flower, which is the national flower of Scotland. And on the right, you can see when that flower starts to wilt, it actually has this down, thistle down. That's what the white stuff is called. And when gusts of wind come, it blows that off into the wind. So it's just this idea of away they all flew like the down of a thistle. They're just floating off. But I heard him exclaim, as in say, ere he drove out of sight, Air is just before in this instance. Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. This last line has been changed a lot in modern days. People often say Merry Christmas. But it's a beautiful line to end with, and one of the poem's most famous lines. Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Yay, we did it! We made it through. Well done.